A warm welcome to our Honorable Minister Patricia de Lille, our Honorable Deputy Minister Maggie Sochu, DG Vele and the team from the department, as well as the team from South African Short-Term Rental Association and all honorable members. Disang, is it possible to flight our agenda for us, please?
Yeah, it's coming up, Chair.
Thank you, Disang. Okay, thank you so much, Disang. Honorable members, as you can see, and everyone on the platform, as you can see, the agenda in front of us. I'll do the opening remarks. It will be followed by our apologies and who is in our meeting, our delegations. Then we'll adopt the agenda. We will give Minister an opportunity to do some brief remarks, and it will then be followed by South African Short-Term Rental Association that will do a presentation for us. It will then followed by the Department of Tourism on the framework of the regulating the sharing economy. Minister, you can decide where you want to come in, whether it's in before the association, the short-term rental association is going to do the presentation, or before the department. But I would just like to give you an opportunity, I think, before the department and the association is doing their presentations.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning to the honorable members, to DG, and to our Deputy Minister and all the support staff. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee this morning on the Code of Good.
Honorable Minister,
Yes,
I will give you an opportunity after I've done my opening remarks.
yes.
I've just taken you through the agenda so that you can, so that you can decide where you want to come in, whether it's before the association or before the department. So if you could just ponder on that one, and then I'll just do my opening remarks quickly.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson. I can do it before the department and the association. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, sure, Honorable Minister. When we started our tenure as this committee, we received a handover document from the Sixth Parliament in the form of a legacy report. Now, we've also conducted our own oversight, and we've developed our own 5-year strategic plan as a 7th Parliament committee. One of the glaring aspects is the need to amend the Tourism Act, number 3 of 2014, to address a number of issues in the tourism sector. And one of the issues that must be legislated and regulated is the modalities around the sharing economy in the sector. And as this committee, we recommended to the Minister that a Tourism Amendment Act should be tabled in Parliament to address the sharing economy in the sector, amongst other things. Minister then opted to develop norms and standards as empowered by the Act to regulate the short-term rentals in the sector. We have also noted that the norms and standards for regulating the short-term rentals were gazetted by the Minister on Friday, the 13th of March 2026 for public comments. These developments are welcome by the committee as they address the short-term rentals, which has caused serious disruptions in the sector. Tourism is a global economic activity that is now currently evolving and shaped by technological developments. The short-term rentals is one such modern development that is shaped by technology, and it cannot be stopped. And it must also not be stopped. But we should be careful in how we regulate to coexist with traditional tourism ways of doing things. It is well known that the disruptors will continue merging in the sector and must be embraced to grow tourism, but be regulated to ensure that they do not destroy the tourism sector. One thing that I notice in the gazetted norms and standards is that the document is only confirmed to the hospitality sector and it leaves out other serious disruptors such as e-hailing services. So in our meeting that we had previously with the National Transport Regulator, we got some insights into the e-hailing services providers that are now being regulated. However, the department should consider including in the regulatory framework for e-hailing service providers in the norms and standards so that the matter of sharing economy is addressed comprehensively. And I keep on using the term sharing economy deliberately so because the issue in the sector are not only with the hospitality industry, but extends to the transport sector as well. So we welcome the development of norms and standards whilst awaiting the introduction of the Tourism Amendment Act. The committee will then engage the presentation to trash out certain nuances and make specific recommendations to be considered for inclusion in the document as it will still be refined based on public comments as invited in the Gazette. So we hope the committee recommendations today will also find their way into the final document. And that is my opening remarks, honorable members. I will now move to our number 2 on our agenda, which is our apologies, Disang. Can you take us through the apologies and who is in our meeting, the delegation?
Good morning, Chair. The apologies from the committee, we've got a full complement present, Chair. I suspect Honorable Mutley is still on sick leave since the ordeal of last week. However, all the other members are present in the committee, Chair, in the meeting. And then from the delegation that we had, initially we had invited the Airbnb, and then they submitted an apology. Then we invited the South African Short-Term Rental Association, who are present in the meeting, and they are led by Mr. Miguel Martin, and he's with his team. Chair, I don't have their list, but I think you will introduce them before they speak. He said that some of the board members are present in the meeting. And then from the Department of Tourism, Chair, we've got the delegation that is led by the Minister, Honorable Delil, and the Deputy Minister, Mem Soju, and then the apology from the Deputy Minister is that she's going to leave around 11 o'clock as she has to catch a flight at around 11 o'clock, Chair. Then the delegation from the department is also led by the DG, Mr. Vele. Then in present also we have Ms. Malan, who is the DDG for Tourism Research, Policy and International Relations and Destination Development. Then we also have the Chief Director for Policy Planning and Strategy. Then we've got the support staff from the Office of the Minister, Mr. Kutsie and Ms. Nikerk. Then we also Mr. Tlaba from the Office of the DM, Mr. Kumakubedu from the Office of the Director General, including Ms. Moroto from the DG's office. There's a delegation from the department, Chair. And then also, Chair, just to put an apology, because I understand members have not received the presentation yet from the SASTRA, which is a South African Short-Term Rental Association. It is because we only received the apology from what is the Airbnb late of Friday, Chair. Hence, we had to ensure that at least we have a representative from that particular sector. Then we managed to secure the SASTRA to be present in the meeting and ensure that they are able to assist the committee with the matters at hand. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Disang. Thank you, Disang. And it's we should try, I think, in future to try and get Airbnb here so that they also understand what is gazetted. so that, we do hear from them. For future purposes, I think we should try and see if we can get hold of them and perhaps slot them in again at a later stage. But I would like to thank the South African Short-Term Rental Association for being present in our meeting. And now, before we receive the presentations, I would just like to get our agenda adopted. May I see a mover for the acceptance of the agenda? Disang, can you assist me with the hands, please?
Yes, we've got Ms. Hlongo, Chair.
Honorable Hlongo, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chair, and everyone on the platform. Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you so much, Honorable Hlongo. Is there a seconder for the adoption of the agenda?
Honorable Khalaba is up, Chair.
Thank you so much, Disang. Honorable Likharaba, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chair. I second the move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Likharaba. With that seconding, our agenda is duly adopted. I would now like to move to the next item on the agenda. But before the South African Short-Term Rental Association presents, I would like to afford our Honorable Minister of Tourism, Honorable Minister Patricia de Lille, an opportunity for brief remarks. Honorable Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and once again, good morning to everyone on the platform. Just to put matters in context, the Department of Tourism is in the process of reviewing the Tourism Act following Cabinet's approval of the 2024 White Paper on the development and promotion of tourism in South Africa. And Honorable Chair, the review process focuses on various aspects in the tourism sector, including policy gaps like the short-term rentals. But whilst this process is underway, we have resolved to find an interim solution that will guide short-term rentals, given the urgent need for guidance. As the committee is aware, Chapter 2 of the Tourism Act of 2014 empowers the minister to issue codes of good practice to guide conduct within the tourism sector. So in line with this mandate and also in accordance with Section 4.3 of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, we have published the draft code for good practice for public comment. We've seen the growth of the short-term rental space, whether through digital platforms or traditional channels, and it has created new opportunities for the host, for communities, and for travelers. But at the same time, it has introduced regulatory gaps, raised concerns from municipalities and from residents, and it highlighted the need for clear, fair, and responsible practices across the sector. So, Honourable Chair, the code is therefore an interim measure while the department continues with the broader review of the Tourism Act following the adoption of the white paper, of course. So the legislative review will address long-term regulatory reforms, but we cannot wait for the full amendment process before providing guidance to the sector, including respecting the legislative processes of Parliament. And so we hope that the code will help to stabilize the environment for now, ensuring that host and guest platforms and communities operate within a shared, framework of responsibility. So, honorable members, as you can see, the code sets out general responsibilities for all participants in the short-term rental ecosystem. And Chairperson, we have now opened up a 60-day public comment period that will close on the 12th of May 2026 to ensure that all stakeholders, hosts, platforms, municipality, industry, the public have an opportunity to contribute, because this consultative process is essential to ensuring that the final code is practical, that it is balanced, and that it is aligned to the needs of the sector. And I want to assure the committee that the department remains committed to transparent, inclusive, and evidence-based regulations. This code is not the end of the process. It is a necessary step towards a more coherent framework for short-term rentals. And Chairperson, I do look forward to the committee's guidance and the committee's engagement as we take this work forward. And Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you to our Honourable Minister for those brief remarks. We'll now move to the next item on our agenda, where we'll be receiving a presentation by South African Short-Term Rental Association. And let me just again welcome the delegation on the board from the association. We'll now give the association an opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just making sure that I can be heard. Sorry, just checking my connectivity. Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for allowing us opportunity to present. When Disang reached out, the request was that we provide an overview of the short-term rental industry, the hosts, with a focus on exactly how short-term rental works, and then some comments on regulation from our perspective. I've been given, I think it's 45 minutes to present. I'm going to maybe present for about 30 minutes and then welcome any comments. But if there are any burning questions, please do stop me, and then we can address any issue there and then. Apologies for not sending out the presentation beforehand. Just wanting to make sure that we had a concise and complete presentation. We really just worked till the last minute. I will be sending the presentation through to Disang after the session to share with the committee. On that basis, I'm going to share, if that's okay.
You may proceed. You may proceed.
Thank you. Just please do let me know. I'm not sure why, but my connectivity seems to be going up and down. If I need to switch off on video, please do let me know. Fantastic. Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can see the slide. You may proceed. Fantastic.
Thank you. So just who is Sastra? Oops, there we go. So who is Sastra? We were formed just under 2 years ago, and it was just really in response to two things, really. To the upcoming regulation that was mooted at the time, and then just generally the fact that in the industry there wasn't any one umbrella group that brought the industry together or represented the industry. So our objectives are to represent and support the industry of short-term rental property owners and operators in South Africa, to provide a unified voice to promote, represent, and enhance the interests of our members, and to create a favorable environment where short-term rental entrepreneurs can thrive, contribute to local economy, and provide exceptional experiences for their guests. At the end of the day, we are a core part of the tourism hospitality sector, and we take it quite seriously. So as a membership, we have 2,200 direct and indirect members, and we have a social media following on our platforms of over 17,000. We have 6 members on the board, and I'd like to just recognize 2 of our board members who are able to make this morning, Mrs. Melanie Creel and Mr. Cregan O'Flynn. Thank you for joining us. The other board members, unfortunately, were not able to make this morning, but we do represent them.
Thank you.
Just a little bit in terms of our engagements. So although just under 2 years old, we have engaged significantly and extensively across the industry, whether it's participating at conferences and exhibitions and engaging with participants there at Meetings Africa, at Travel and Darber, etc., as well as running educational programs for co-hosts for those wanting to get into the industry. And then engaging and participating at the various tourism conferences, most recently at the KZN Tourism Conference in November and the KZN Think Tank at the same time. We hold regular members meetups, both online and in person, and this is incredibly important for us to ensure that we always have our members, we always have their voice in our ears. In terms of our engagement map, we have engaged with the Department of Tourism, both in terms of feedback to the white paper earlier last year and at the end of the last year, in terms of inputs to the Code of Good Practice, which just recently came out. We also engaged with CSOS, the Community Schemes Ombudsman, and I'll talk about why that's important just now. We are a member of the TBCSA, and through the TBCSA, we did put forward a suggestion for a Code of Good Practice, which I'm glad our thinking was aligned with where the department was going. We've engaged with the Tourism Grading Council, although very limited progress being made there. Of course, our cousin associations, FedHaas and SATSA, and then, of course, South African Tourism. Airbnb, Booking.com, Lekkerslaap form part of our strategic partners. We meet with them on a quarterly basis. We see they are key to the industry. At the end of the day, they are marketing platforms. Airbnb being the brand that's flattered the most, but Airbnb and Booking.com largely lead and share the market share in the space, and Lekkerslaap being our South African-born booking software that we support and ensure that we get that homegrown market share as well. And then lastly, we have engaged with the various cities, with City of Cape Town, specifically around the upcoming tariffs, City of Joburg and City of Tshwane, and others such as Gauteng Tourism Authority, etc. So to logically, we've attempted to make sure that we have our voice heard on the various platforms and the various forums, and that we understand exactly as best as possible where the various directions are coming from and how best to support and put forward the voice of the short-term rental operator. From a market sizing perspective, so are we significant in the market? There are very thin numbers in terms of trying to get a sense of this. But putting together various different sources and looking at, if you look at 3 different products, being hotels, guest houses, and Airbnbs, and forgive me if we use Airbnbs and short-term rentals in the same way. What we found is that short-term rentals comprise around 50%, 51% of the market. That might be 40%, it might be more than 50%. It's not quite clear because there's no real data available, and the OTAs, Booking.com and Airbnb, do not provide that data due to competitive issues. But we are a significant part of the market that is not supported, does not form part of any strategy at the moment other than what the department is working on. And so this is really why our voice is incredibly important to be heard in the market. So what is a short-term rental? So there's no official definition that exists, but loosely a short-term rental is defined as a provision of accommodation for less than 28 days for payment in a residential property. And forgive us, that's not a very legal definition, but that really the key items there are it's accommodation less than a month in a residential property. The property types that short-term rental operators tend to work with are a room in a property, in a house, a cottage on a property, an apartment, or a full house. And of course, those are the main property types. There are a variety of others. In terms of offering, what makes short-term rentals different to a guest house or a hotel is that we are self-catering. It's very homely. You really are in someone else's home. There are limited cleaning services. There isn't a daily servicing there for the most part, unless the guest requires it. But the intent is that our properties are a home from home. For the most part, we advertise online. We either have our own websites. We work with Google, with Airbnb, Booking.com, or Lekker. So these days, and as long as short-term rentals have been around, it's always been online. 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, we were in newspapers. Now we're online. And the likes of Airbnb and Booking.com has really driven growth in the sector. Our guest profiles are guests who are staying because of business, leisure, sometimes medical reasons, wanting to be having extended visits with a medical facility and needing to stay nearby, spiritual visits, and educational, and really any other reason why someone would want to come to a particular destination. A large part of how we operate is on a trust basis, and this is delivered through platforms like Airbnb and Booking.com, Google reviews, where bookers can look at previous reviews provided by guests. What is interesting with short-term rentals is that our geographic reach is extensive. You will find a short-term rental in a location where hotels and other more commercial, formal hospitality offerings will not go there due to the business case not making sense, but you'll probably find a short-term rental there. So we have the opportunities to really extend reach where other hospitality providers do not go. In terms of community, short-term rentals enable guests to live within and experience the community. This has a very positive slant to it, but given some feedback, it can have a very negative impact, when guests do behave badly. But our guests use our local restaurants, our local grocers, our local service providers, and so there's a very significant and micro impact on communities. And for the most part, short-term rentals are managed by the owner, and most often for extra income, as I'll show you just now. Last year, April, we did a host survey, and we focused the survey, the questions and survey on 4 key agenda items that we know that are important at a national level. One is to enable women in tourism, support transformation, drive employment creation, and create the opportunity for small business access to tourism. Insights were really interesting. What we found, just some highlights, is that 80% of short-term rental operators are female, 52% are non-white, with that percentage growing annually. 70% are not full-time employed. They're either part-time employed or self-employed. And why that's critical is that the income earned from a short-term rental is incredibly important to the income in that household. On the right, the majority of hosts own their own property, 63%, and a short-term rental on average employs 2.7 people, whether that's a housekeeper, the host themselves, tradesmen, gardeners, etc. So at a micro level, it really does generate employment. On the top left, In terms of building type, 49% of short-term rentals are sectional title apartments. This is important in terms of short-term rentals being close proximity to other residents in a sectional title. 27% are cottages on a property, which talks to that additional income, which is relied upon. In terms of occupancy percentages, 45% of hosts are breaking even or making a loss. So in principle, 55-60% occupancy, that's the number of days that a property is let out in the month. 55-60% is about break even. Anything less than that, and really the host is in trouble. And this is important when we're looking at measures that increase the costs for our hosts. On the top right, many hosts recommend a local business, but we acknowledge that we could do more, and this is a particular issue or opportunity that we're thinking about at Sastra. And then on the bottom right, we asked our hosts how many times in the last year have you had bad guest behavior impacting your neighbors, and almost 50% said yes, that they had that impact. We had about 20% impacting more than 2 times. So bad guests and bad guest behavior, and the ability for the host to manage those guests is incredibly important, and that's where education comes in for hosts. We asked our hosts what they expected from the Department of Tourism white paper, and given this is about a year ago, so many hosts were not aware of the proposed regulation. But when we asked them what benefit might it bring, we had 40% saying they're expecting the regulation to bring a fair level playing field for all and improve quality and standards. And it's so great to see that expectation is being met with the recent release of the proposed codes of good practice. What negatives might regulation bring? 57% spoke to the limiting the ability to do business, 30% increasing bureaucracy. So this and these would be expected, and nothing. When we look at these and we say, well, how can we avoid these and get the benefits? A lot of talk has been had around the 90-day cap. It's a strategy. It's been used in overseas in London and Paris, and it was mooted, I think, in one of the oversight committee meetings during the course of last year. And when we asked our members what would be the impact of a 90-day cap, almost 50% said I'd effectively have to close down if that was the impact. So definitely, this is not something we'd really like not to occur. 3 types of short-term rental models largely exist. One is the owner, where the owner is the host and manages the property themselves. The second model is what we refer to as rental arbitrage, where a host rents a property from the owner and then sublets it as a short-term rental, of course, with permission. And then the third one is property management, where a property manager manages a short-term rental on behalf of the owner for a fee. So you'll see that the first and third, number 1, number 3 models are actually very similar. It just talks to who actually manages it, because ultimately it's the owner that benefits. And then the second model, rental arbitrage, takes a different approach to it. But in each of these, it comes down to managing a room, a cottage, an apartment, and a house. And what I really wanted, one of the things I want you to walk away with is understanding that a short-term rental host can start off by renting out a room in their property. That room can become an apartment, a cottage, and ultimately a house. And this we see as the value chain in terms of access and entry into the tourism sector for many in the space. When you look at existing regulation, 3 tiers maybe I want to mention. Of course, at a national level, we have star grading. It's not quite regulation, but it does provide a framework. We now have the Code of Good Practice that's coming, that will be implemented over the next few months. But then we also have the likes of tax law and workplace law. In the media, some of the comments that often come up is, but are short-term rentals paying tax? What can we do about that? How are they treating their staff, etc. These issues are already regulated with existing laws, and probably don't require the same focus from a tourism or national perspective. At a local level, we have local zoning regulations where our properties, if they fall within a zoning definition, need to be aligned to that. We have short-term rental specific tariffs that are starting to come in, such as what the City of Cape Town is working on at the moment. And then some municipalities and some provinces have business licensing. It will take a business licensing approach to operating a business on the properties. Worth noting is what's happening in the Quadacruza municipality, Belito, where there's a disconnect between what the municipality has put out as a policy and exactly what's operationally possible. And there's a lot of concern and just misalignment between short-term rental operators, residents, and the municipality. We've seen, and there's a lot of accusations going backwards and forwards. And the reason I bring this here is that it's incredibly important that we have an aligned framework going forward, so that these issues that we're seeing in real time, in Quadacruza, don't occur, and when they do occur, can be brought back into a more aligned and expected framework. And then I also want to mention a level of self-regulation that exists today. So where Airbnb and Booking.com largely cover about 90% of all bookings for short-term rental operators, their reviews themselves, and those reviews are reviews that previous guests left based on that property. That really enables future bookers to consider whether this is a property they're happy to book at. If previous guests had a negative experience and share it in their review, either through a comment or the actual score, this definitely impacts whether that property is put forward by the platform itself and whether guests will actually move forward to book. Of course, Google also has Google reviews, which many operators also subscribe to. And although the self-regulation is not in law, it's an incredibly important aspect of our industry and worth noting. Looking at regulation further afield, and then looking at how what we can learn from international regulation, the white paper makes reference to 5 cities and regions. 2 of them are London and Paris. And we engaged with our London and Paris counterparts during the course of last year to understand what was the experience with the regulation that they had. So in both London and Paris, a short-term rental operator can operate for 90 days. And after 90 days worth of bookings, they have to remove their listing or shut it down and move to other forms of rental, anything longer than a short-term rental. In London, the feedback we received, that this has created a shadow economy where operators continue and operate illegally to work around this regulation, and operators create duplicate listings on the same property to extend their operations. In Paris, there are incredibly high fines for operators that break the 90-day cap, and the reason for those fines is that it's incredibly difficult to find operators and to prove that they're operating outside those limits. And at the time there was a court challenge on whether the regulation was constitutional or not. Also worth noting is that in these figures are for 2024, waiting for updated figures, But Paris received 47 million visitors in 2024. London received just over 20 million. And as a country in 2024, we received just short of 9 million visitors. So I think very different contexts, very different challenges. And the concern we had with the white paper is that it referenced these. And in our engagements with the authors of the white paper at the department earlier last year, the request was, let's learn from them and let's learn what good can come out of it, and also understand how to avoid some of the negative implications of this type of regulation. As I come to an end, so what does growth-oriented regulation look like? And we put out to our members late last night and early this morning, if they had to put forward what they thought was a one-liner that they'd like to get over to the committee today, what would that look like? And I'm not going to go through it, and I'll happily share this. These are screen grabs from what's come through on our WhatsApp groups. But basically, in summary, it really talks to a regulation that remembers that our hosts are predominantly SMMEs. They are micro operators. There are some significantly large operators out there, but for the most part, these are small operators. Consists of regulation that talks that framework across various municipalities that should focus on improving the guest experience. There's a general openness to the codes of good practice. It's still under review, and we expect significant feedback to go to the department in the next 60 days, or is it 55 days by now? But general openness to that approach, and regulation that protects both residents and hosts, so balances the rights in terms of property use. On that note, I got through that quite quickly. Apologies if I rushed it, but happy to take any questions, any comments, and maybe some further discussion. Chair, if you'd like me to refer back to any particular slide.
Well, thank you, Miguel. Let me just get an indication from honorable members whether they would like to receive the second presentation. I think we should just, or whether they would like to pose questions. I know they've not had the presentation in front of them to peruse the presentation, but if there are any questions that they've jotted down, that they do pose their questions for you. Honorable members, may I have an indication of whether we should proceed to pose questions now, or you would like to receive the second presentation and then pose questions? Yes, Honorable Ishmael, I just see a message pop up.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Chair, may I suggest we just get all the presentations and then ask the questions last so we can save time?
Okay, thank you, Honorable Ishmael. Let me then just give an opportunity to our department where we are going to receive a briefing on the framework for regulating the sharing economy. I know DG Vela, I've heard DG Vela is here, and DG Malan. Over to you, DG Vela, and your team. And good morning.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. And good morning to the honorable members, to the honorable minister, honorable deputy minister, and all the colleagues, as well as the guests that you've got on the platform. Honorable Chairperson, we have agreed that Mr. Senzo Nkala, who's our policy planning and strategy chief director, will take us through the presentation. And it's quite a brief presentation. It goes directly into the content of the Gazette itself and the processes that will be followed subsequent to the conclusion of the comments period, public comment period in this regard. And I would just say to Senzo that we should stick to our own script and not necessarily debate or engage the presentation that was done before this particular one. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Senzo, over to you.
Mr. Mkali, you may proceed.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, and Honorable members, as well as the DG and the entire delegation of the department. I will be taking you through the codes of good practice with a focus on legislative context, the guidelines, the proposed guidelines for the host, the proposed guidelines for the guests, and also the proposed guidelines for the platforms. And most importantly, I will touch on the importance of health and safety aspects that both our host platforms and guests also ought to look at as in their interaction in the STR activity. And in terms of the purpose, it is for the department to brief the portfolio committee on the framework for the code of good practice for the short-term rental. I think, as the minister indicated, this is an interim measure whilst we are working on the long-term regulatory aspect as the department is moving towards the review of the Tourism Act of 2014. We also intend to outline the objectives and scope and responsibilities of the code. And the department has also started a process of public comment, so we also seek to update the committee on that process. We can move to the next slide. In terms of context, Chapter 2 of the Tourism Act of 2014 empowers the minister to issue the codes of good practice. And Section 8A in particular states that the minister may, by notice in the Gazette, issue a code of good practice to guide the conduct relating to tourism services, facilities, and products. So various clauses were looked at, and the department resolved that this is the appropriate route that we ought to take to assist to deal with the conduct in the interim measure. And the proposed code of good practice, therefore, seeks to contribute to the broader objective of the Tourism Act, that is to provide for the development and promotion of sustainable tourism for the benefit of South Africans and our visitors. Relatedly, the department also is publishing this in terms of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. The Promotion of Administrative Justice Act underlines the importance, for government to decide, on the appropriate procedure and fairness, to communicate the decisions that are impacting the public, and so it is either through public inquiry or through the notice to then facilitate, a comments procedure. And the department also then looked at that and then decided that it's important for us to publish these codes for public comments. We can go to the next slide. So in terms of the purpose of the code, we seek to outline, we seek to outline the good practice behavior for the short-term rental industry participants. And the code also supports the sustainable tourism growth and inclusion. So we want a sector that not only just grows, for its own sake, but it must also have an inclusive element, as there was an indication that this enables, small players to also enter into the industry. This non-binding code of good practice seeks to guide short-term rentals operation as an interim measure, pending the amendment of the Tourism Act, as we indicated earlier in the introductions. The department is in the process of reviewing the Tourism Act following the approval by Cabinet in 2024, and the process will move in earnest in the new financial year. The review will focus on various regulatory issues, including, of course, what we're discussing today, the aspect of short-term rental. Whilst the review is underway, the department then decided that let's have an interim measure to guide the short-term rental subsector. And the department will then submit a bill to amend the Tourism Act, whereafter Parliament will follow its public participation process. We can move to the next slide. In terms of the objectives of the code, the code acknowledges the presence of short-term rentals within our tourism landscape, whilst ensuring that the activity develops in a balanced manner, consistent with government policy objectives. It also seeks to clarify the roles of the hosts, the guests, the platforms, and designated persons. If you're listening to Miguel, he touched on the fact that there are some people who get appointed to manage these properties on behalf of others, to encourage responsible and sustainable STR operations, to promote the quality tourism products and services. We seek to ensure that this subsector, still maintains, what we're known for, that we're a value for money destination, to foster cooperation among stakeholders, to raise awareness of responsible tourism principles, including minimizing the negative social and environmental impacts. So all our subsectors of tourism, have been observing these principles. So we also want to ensure that this subsector also contributes to that, to enhance community well-being and fostering respect between visitors and hosts, and provide guidance on legal, health, and safety considerations. We can move to the next slide. And in terms of the general responsibilities to all, the hosts, the guests, and platforms, and the code underlines the importance of acting lawfully, honestly, and in good faith, provide accurate and complete, information, in their interaction, to comply with all applicable laws and regulations. If you recall, there are laws at local level, that governs, business interaction. The code, encourages that, and to respect municipal bylaws and property-related instruments. We can move to the next slide. In terms of guidelines now relating to the hosts, the code underlines the need for the host to inform visitors about applicable laws, both the corporate rules and community-specific norms, whether it relates to the noise, the parking, the reviews and use of public spaces. It's important that our visitors are aware of that, because they will be living within the communities, to inform the guests of the need to avoid disruptive neighborhood peace, security, and negligent property damage, and to provide basic health and safety, equipment, with instructions on how to use them in the event of emergencies, to provide, providing accommodation consistent with market representations, treating guests with integrity and fairness in line with consumer laws, and maintaining appropriate liability insurance covering the risk of death, injury, and loss of property. When we're doing consultation during the white paper, some of these things came out quite strongly, that they also need to be addressed, because should something wrong, happen and someone passes away, and people can be taken to task, by family members of those that have, been injured or dead. So that aspect, the host need to understand. The same issues around the disruptive, behavior and so on. A lot of the comments also touched on that we need an instrument, that will touch on that particular area. Ensure that a responsible contact person is available to address guest and neighborhood concerns. That's another issue that came out quite strongly. And provide guests with emergency contact information, including health, fire, security, and essential service providers. So issues relating to hospitality in case hospital numbers in case of emergency and so on, our guests must have that in hand. In terms of the responsible guest behavior now, because we're not only focusing on our hosts, but we also want our guests, to ensure that they also comply, with our laws as they visit, our destination. They must comply with applicable rules, bylaws, and board corporate rules, etc. They must use the property and its amenities responsibly without unreasonably interfering with the rights of neighbors or communities. A lot of complaints have come up, in this regard. So it's important that at least when the guests check in, they are aware of this. Avoid the conduct that creates excessive noise, nuisance, distress, or disturbance to neighbors and other occupants. I think we saw on the different kinds of STR there, body corporate was part of that. So there are a lot of issues there. So the code is also trying to address that. Not intentionally or negligently damage the premises, communal facilities or neighboring properties. So when our visitors, exit, our host must still be able to host the next, visitors, and not have a situation where, the property is damaged, and so on. Act with due care for the safety and security of the premises and the surrounding community, including preventing unauthorized access, vacate the property at the agreed upon checkout date and time. I think we all know how strict, our hospitality sector is here, because when you exit, it gives them an opportunity to clean up the property and prepare for the next guest. So it's important that our guests, they adhere, to these time frames, familiarize themselves with the compensation rules relating to the damage to property, and provide accurate, reachable contact details and emergency contact information before occupying the property. We can move to the next slide. And then in relation to platforms' responsibilities, the proposals here is that the platforms must inform the short-term rental host or designated person of this code of good practice. They must ensure the availability of this code of good practice on their websites and relevant applications where applicable. They must endeavor to support the host and guest in post-guest check, in post-guest checkout conflict resolutions, and they must endeavor to support hosts to ensure a positive guest, experience. And it's important, to ensure that, our guests, feel, welcomed, so that we will also experience that repeat visits. Notifying the host or guest of any complaint received relating to the host or guest and reminding them of the applicable guidelines. The platform must also ensure the safe handling of host and guest data in line with relevant prescripts. They must also assist government and STR stakeholders with the latest information relating to hosts subject to applicable laws, and also share information on the economic contribution of the STR subsector where available, subject to applicable laws and data protection. I think we have already seen some of these industry players, sharing some of the economic contribution, the number of people, who are employed, and also some have gone to the extent of indicating the contribution to the economy. We can move to the next slide. In relation to health and safety, we're saying the code is underlining the importance of understanding and practice, occupational health and safety requirements, including but not limited to installing smoke detectors and relevant safety, equipment, provide guests with information relating to fire escapes and basic fire safety equipment, provide first aid kit in accessible area for guests and restock, the first aid kit where necessary, and comply with the prevailing public health norms and standards, applicable to the tourism sector, and ensure that guests comply with the maximum occupancy limit as displayed in the listing advert and stipulated in the applicable house rules, or schemes. So if an STR accommodation is supposed to host, 3 people per night, it should be 3 people per night. We can't have a situation where instead of 3, now 10 people are there yet on the agreement. It is three. This is the kind of behavior and the issues around health and safety that the court is trying to address, and maintain appropriate insurance coverage, to protect themselves as well as guests against property damages, negligence claims, and liabilities. One of the important issues that we also learned here during consultation was that the guests sometimes are very quick to sue. So it's important for our hosts to understand this environment, including having that protection, so that they are also not ruined financially, should that happen. And in terms of the next slide, we are just updating the committee here that the department has published the draft short-term rental code of good practice for public comments. This was done on the 13th of March 2026. The public then can submit their input within 60 days from the date of publication of the notice, and the due date is the 12th of May 2026. And submissions can be mailed or hand delivered to the department, and the contact details are there. And in terms of the email, we generated an email so that it can be able to handle the volumes that will come, because there's huge interest in this area. So it is STR codes of conduct at tourism.gov.za. Thank you so much, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I'm not sure whether the DG or the Minister would like to add, but thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
No, thank you, Mr. Mkala. DG, is there anything you would like to add before I give members an opportunity to engage with the presentation?
Senzo has adequately covered us, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, DG Vela. Honorable members, I will now give an opportunity to yourselves to engage with the presentation, both presentations. So I will note hands. Tisang, please assist.
Okay, Chair. On the list, we've got Honorable Ishmael, Honorable Hlongo, Honorable Buthelezi, Honorable Maejo, Honorable Lekharaba, Honorable Tito, and then Mr.
Please
Mashaka,
note Honorable Dekhale, Honorable Dekhale.
Honorable Dikhale, and Honorable Basson. And then, Chair, Honorable Mashabela did inform me that she's got a problem with network. So I suspect I just need to check with her if she wants to ask questions, Chair.
Oh, Honorable Mashabela, ne?
Yes, just put Honorable Mashabela at the end, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Desang. Honorable Ishmael, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning once again to you, Chair, to our colleagues and everybody on the platform. I was going to almost say, we're putting the cart before the horse when I was looking at the white paper, but I think the Minister has clarified why she's actually introducing these codes and, of good practice, so I understand it. Welcome move, Minister. I just have a few questions based on the department's presentation, more than, SESTRA's presentation. Looking at the purpose and scope, on page 3, what specific metrics will be used to measure the success of the Code of Good Practice? And how will the code address potential conflict between hosts and local communities? And then again, on that point, what role would local governments play in implementing this code? I think this is key because obviously we're looking at bylaws, etc. And then looking at pages 5 to 8, the codes and responsibilities. How will platforms be held accountable for ensuring hosts comply with the code? Because the codes look good, but how are we going to ensure that, there is some sort of compliance, since those are the platforms that they use? And then secondly, on that same, responsibilities and codes, what support systems will be put in place for hosts who struggle to meet code requirements? We know that these are like SMMEs, and obviously they may be having some difficulties. And then how will guest behavior be actually monitored and addressed if they breach code guidelines? We know that, guests fill in a survey and so forth after they leave and, but how are we actually going to be monitoring these codes if they are being breached? And then on the health and safety aspect on page 9, will there be a standardized safety checklist for all short-term rentals, and who will conduct these inspections? I mean, have we got all our ducks in a row? That's why I'm asking this question. And how will hosts ensure compliance with safety requirements in emergency situations? I asked this in context with the SESTRA presentation. It can either be a room or it could be, a guest house or so forth. So I'm asking the department, how will we ensure that compliance again? And then what's the process for reporting safety concerns or incidents in short-term rentals? And then again, in the same presentation of the department, on page 2, the legislative context, how will inconsistencies between national and local short-term rental regulations be addressed? We've already picked up from the SESTRA presentation that there was, I think, Quadadusa or something municipality, what was the actual bylaws was not actually being implemented on the ground. So in this case, I'm basically asking how will these inconsistencies between our national sphere and then the local short-term rentals be actually addressed, because I don't think we need that loophole. So we need to be not working in silos. And then what protections are in place for hosts and guests under the code? And then again, how will the code interact with existing consumer protection laws? I think that is important because we don't want to actually reinvent the wheel, but it's important that everybody is just as much protected. And then on public comments processes on page 10, how will the public comments be prioritized and incorporated into the final code? Will there be regional consultations or only the central public comment process? And how will stakeholders be notified about changes resulting from public comments? And another point on that one is that if there's inconsistencies or there's very much variance or differences in public comments inputs, maybe some of them will say A and the others will say Z, how are you actually going to correlate and look at that as to what should be actually be incorporated and what not? And then what's the estimated economic impact of implementing the code
Try
on
and wrap
the
up,
short-term
Honorable
rentals?
Ismail.
I'm nearly
Try and
finished.
Try
How
and
will the
wrap.
code, thank you, Chair, how will the code affect short-term rental pricing and availability? And then what support will be provided to hosts transitioning to code compliances? And lastly, Minister, when are you planning to introduce the Tourism Amendment Bill again back in Parliament in the 7th Parliament? You told us 7th Parliament, but if you could get some time frame, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ismail. Honorable Hlongo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me also take the opportunity, Chair, and greet the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the DG, and the entire team from the department. Chair, before I forget, one concerning matter that was raised in the Portfolio Committee last week, but then the Minister, the DG, were not in the meeting. And seeing that the DG is here today, I'd want to pose the question. We've learned as a committee that there are a lot or a number of people leaving the institution or people resigning. Can the DG please clarify what is happening or bring it to the Portfolio Committee on what is happening? Why are people leaving the institution in their numbers? Thanks, Chair. Then I'll move to my questions. Chairperson, the hospitality sector in South Africa pays 1% voluntary TOMSA levies. The Code of Good Practice is silent on the short-term rentals as contributors to the TOMSA levies. Why did the department deem it unnecessary for the STR sector to be included in the TOMSA levy collection arrangement? Again, given that the short-term rentals are operated as businesses, why is the Code of Good Practice silent on the STR sector on paying taxes to government, like all other hospitality establishments in the country, such as hotels? Does the department have an idea of how many establishments are operating in the short-term rental space in South Africa? If not, has the department engaged municipalities on how many STR establishments are operating in each municipality or city? Again, Chairperson, the committee is cognizant is a concurrent function. However, it is concerning what short-term rental platforms such as Airbnb is doing in cities like Cape Town. The competing demands between economic development and regulations are at the center of the local economy debates, including taxes and property prices. Has the department engaged cities such as Cape Town on the challenges caused by Airbnb? If yes, what are the insights gained from the challenges faced by Cape Town? And how will these be passed to regulate such impacts nationally? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hlongo. Honorable Maecho.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to the Minister, delegation from the department led by the DG. Greetings to the presenters of the STR, Miguel, and honorable members. I will start with the question to Miguel in relation to his presentation, although I might say that next time in future we need to get this presentation prior to a meeting, because we are given limited time to ask critical questions, Miguel. So next time, please submit the presentations in prior to the meeting so that we are able to peruse your work. In as far as the consistency of regulation, how do you plan to address the current fragmented regulatory landscape across different municipalities in South Africa? That's the first question, Miguel. And then the second question, will you be working with government agencies to establish a unified regulatory framework for short-term rentals? Moving to another question in terms of the guest house experiences. How do you ensure that short-term rental properties meet the same standard as traditional guest houses or hotels in terms of quality, safety, and services? And this, I think, is a question that was also asked by latter speakers. And then I think the department has covered me in terms of the good codes of good practices in relation to your presentation. And then the last point on your presentation, Miguel, is the issue of how fair competition. How do you plan to ensure that short-term rentals operate on a level playing field with traditional accommodation providers, particularly in the previously marginalized communities such as your Langa, your Sharpeville, Soweto, and so forth, so that they can also be in competition with hotels and guest houses that are in the established areas? And then lastly, will you be advocating for tax and regulatory parity between short-term rentals and traditional accommodation providers? And to the department, I think that the element that I need to also include here is the same as the data speakers on the municipal authority. And the question are as follows. What specific powers do municipalities have to regulate short-term rentals, and how do these powers intersect with national regulations? And then the number two, are municipalities adequately resourced to ensure short-term rental regulations? And you spoke about bylaws consistency. Now, the question will be, how do municipalities ensure their bylaws align with national tourism and accommodation standards? Are these inconsistencies in bylaws across municipalities that impact short-term rental operators? The last point will be collaboration and the coordination in as far as the National Department of Tourism and the local sphere of government. Now, the question is that how do municipalities collaborate with local stakeholders, e.g. tourism boards, residents, operators, to develop and enforce short-term rental regulations? And lastly, what mechanism exists for municipalities to share best practices on regulating short-term rentals? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Maecho. Honorable Buthelezi.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to the department that is with us here in the meeting, and greetings to my fellow colleagues. Chairperson, my questions will be I've got only 2 questions to the department. Tourism is identified as a sector that must contribute to job creation. However, the short-term rentals mainly operate through the booking platforms of facilitators. This does not create real job tourism. How will the department ensure that the STR create meaningful jobs opportunities in the country? And second question is, some of the STR rental stock is owned by foreign nationals in major cities and operated through foreign booking platforms. How will be the code of conduct practice ensure that there is no tourism economic leakage through the growing STR sector in the country? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Buthelezi. Honorable Ikharaba.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you, the Minister, the DG, my colleagues, and everyone present in the meeting. Chairperson, I have some few questions based on the presentation both by the department and by Mr. I forgot the surname, sorry. Chairperson, how does the department intend to ensure that short-term rentals code of good practice translate into enforceable action rather than remaining a voluntary guideline? On regulation and enforcement, what penalties will be imposed on non-compliant operators? On registration and data management, how will government verify the accuracy of listing on digital platforms? Will the platforms be compelled to share data with authorities to support the regulation? Impact on our community's share. What role will municipality play in handling complaints and enforcement of bylaws? On economic impact and fair competition, what measures are in place to ensure tax compliance by short-term rental operators? Regarding the safety and consumer protection, how will tourists be protected from misleading listing or unsafe accommodation? Is there a dispute resolution mechanism for? Is there a dispute resolution mechanism for guests and hosts? On the transformation and inclusivity, Chair, how does the codes advance transformation and support participation by previously disadvantaged individuals in the tourism sector? Are they going to have support programs to help small and emerging operators complying with regulations? My last question, Chair, ultimately, how will the department ensure that implementation of these codes contribute meaningfully to sustainable tourism growth while protecting communities and maintaining industry standards? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ikharaba. Honorable Tito.
Thanks, Chairperson. Good morning to the Minister and the Deputy Minister and everyone who is present, and also my colleagues. Chair, I have 2 questions which I'm going to ask to the department. What mechanisms are included in the Code of Good Practices to protect SMMEs from unfair competition posed by the short-term rental providers in the hospitality sector? And given that the Code of Good Practice is not binding, what remedies are available for short-term rental guests in case they experience challenges such as false advertisement and cancellations and other related matters? And also, Chair, on the issue of the government gazette, can the department also clarify to us what measures are also there in place, because of we see that the department has only gazetted the code in the government gazette. Can they also give us maybe measures? Did they do community engagements in terms of clarifying the committee on how can they maybe make comments on this code of good reference? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tito. Honorable Basson, followed by Honorable Dikhale.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I've actually been covered by Honorable Ishmael, so I'm not going to repeat for the waste of time. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Basson. Honorable Dikhale.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to the Minister, the Deputy Minister, DG in the department. Greetings to yourself, Chair of the committee, and the honorable members. I'm going to focus on the Code of Good Practice as it was defined. The criteria for it was defined as the criteria for broad-based economic empowerment. My question will focus on the sustainability development in the rural tourism because I do not see it. I'm staying in the rural area. I think we are being neglected because there is no rural tourism. When you check on how we are building our houses, it's not different to the ones that have been built in town. You get double-story houses in town, you get double-story houses in our areas, but we are not being assisted. So my request is that we need to target the rural residents, focusing on the youth, the women ownership, and we need to make sure that we see that these people are being employed. Now, my question, Chair, what mechanism is the department going to ensure that the local communities are not just passive recipients, but active participants and decision makers in the implementation of the Rural Tourism Code? I'm saying this because the rural tourism has a high potential to stimulate the economic growth and social change. One of the objectives is to promote quality tourism products and services, but we do not see it in the rural areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Dikhale. Honorable Mashabela. Honorable Mashabela. I think Honorable Mashabela is struggling with network.
Yeah, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, she promised to send me written questions, but I haven't received them yet. I think you can continue so long.
Okay, I think we'll proceed. I see still the hand of Honorable Hlongo. Honorable Hlongo, is that a historical hand or you would like to raise something? Honorable Hlongo?
Sorry about that, Chair.
Oh, it's a historic hand. Thank you, Honorable Hlongo. I'd like now to, we've exhausted all honorable members have posed their questions. I'll now hand over to Miguel. There was quite a few questions that was posed to yourself, and then to Mr. Mkala and DG Vele. There was also quite a number of questions posed to the department. Miguel, I'll give you first to go to interact with the questions that honorable members have posed, as well as then followed by Mr. Mkala. Over to you, Miguel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the questions. Great to be having this conversation. I got down 5 broad questions, and if I miss any, please let me know. So one of the first questions I was asked was, is SASTRA willing to work with government in terms of regulation and the codes of good practice, etc.? Absolutely. To this date, we've engaged with the department itself in various aspects, and we continue to encourage that engagement. We've engaged with the tourism, the grading council, and looked at some aspects there. We'd like to engage with them further, but I think and it'd be interesting to see how we actually execute on the code of good practice. We do support the code of good practice. We do support the general, what we refer to, the professionalizing of the industry, improving our standards. Right now, there are no standards in the industry. We do believe the industry operates at a high standard, but these standards being proposed by the department absolutely gives us a minimum benchmark that we all should adhere to. So with the TBCSA, I'm looking forward to further engagement. In terms of a question asked in terms of ensuring our standards are the same as guest houses, exactly that. I think this code of good practice will adhere not just to short-term rentals, but I think it should apply to the industry as such. I don't know that there is a code of good practice for guest houses, but and looking forward to this to short-term rentals, bringing on and adhering to these codes of good practices. Then there was a question around leveling the playing field using common examples such as Langa and some other areas. We believe that using platforms such as Airbnb, Booking.com, Lekker, etc., it provides opportunity for the small hospitality provider, accommodation provider, who's not able to easily access business travelers, leisure travelers to the area, to create a platform for them to market themselves. And that's a benefit of the likes of these platforms, is that they create that market. Often these small enterprises rely on websites, word of mouth, etc., not leveraging the significant digital platforms and digital marketing capabilities that exist today. So we do think that using the likes of Airbnb, Booking.com, Lekker, and other platforms, that these SMEs can put their product and make it available for travelers to their areas. And that's, there we talk about leveling the playing field in terms of uplifting those SMEs. And then a question around tax parity between short-term rentals and regulated entities. So if it's normal revenue taxes, we have the same requirements. It's in terms of tax law, those requirements are out there. They already are regulated, already governed, already understood, and so that tax parity remains in place. And then a comment around employment creation. So interestingly, short-term rentals, so if you take a typical short-term rental being an apartment, which is rented out as required, the employment required, the housekeeping and other maintenance required for an apartment versus, for example, a hotel or guest house, which has multiple rooms managed or serviced by a single housekeeper. Short-term rentals are actually very inefficient operations when it comes to employment. We employ more people than we need to. So where a housekeeper will service an apartment and take the majority of a day, in a hotel or guest house, that housekeeper would be servicing several rooms, several apartments within that space. So short-term rentals, by the very virtue of the operational structure, do drive more employment than other hospitality providers. In addition, maybe also worth mentioning, last year we ran a program where we exposed youth to co-hosting opportunities. Co-hosting is where one works with an owner to manage and market their short-term rental. And the opportunity here is not just a South African opportunity, but we can have our South African youth co-hosting for pretty much any country in the world using these platforms. So that's quite an exciting opportunity that we were able to take 40 youth on during the course of last year, and we plan to do more of that this year. So I think we need to consider that short-term rentals and the fact that they leverage these digital platforms do create opportunities that we have yet to really leverage. I want to pause there, Chair, and just see if I missed any question or comment that was that I needed to respond to.
Thank you, Miguel. Honorable members, are there any follow-ups? Or were all your questions that you've posed to Miguel sufficiently interacted with? Honorable members? Are we still having honorable members on the platform?
Yes, Chair, we're here and we're fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Hlongo. Thank you, Miguel. That means that, you have sufficiently answered all the questions that honorable members have posed. Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, DG Vele and Mr. Mkala to interact with the questions for the department.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the members for the questions. I'm going to ask Senzo to start just briefly and then also give an opportunity to DDG Malan to take one or two, especially the measurement issues and so on. And then there's a few that I will also attend to, filling the gaps. Senzo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to honorable members for the questions. Let me try and respond to some of the questions. With regards to the code being silent on tax payment, I think it's important to indicate that the short-term rentals, whilst they were engaging with us as a tourism sector, they were also having parallel engagements with Treasury, where Treasury was also guiding them, around the payment of tax and how do you pay tax on income. I think that there's been a lot of discussions with the Treasury. I remember even at the beginning of this process, when we're discussing broadly as in the sharing economy dialogue, Treasury was involved, and they were also taking them through, what are the tax requirements, so that the hosts, are aware of their tax obligation. So we couldn't cater for it here, given that Treasury is handling it on the other side, and that mandate falls, I think, within their role. With regards to the number of STRs that are operating, I think we don't have an accurate number at this point, given that we haven't collected a database of some sort. But that is also one of the proposals of the tourism white paper, that we must have some sort of an idea on how many STRs are operating in the sector, so that we also understand the supply side, of the tourism sector. So that process is going to be part of the review of the Act, because there's also a discussion around how do we build this register, because we also don't want a situation where we burdened, these STRs with registration requirement. We know that the associations, the short-term rental platforms do have, a register of this. So we'll need to find a way where we'll all agree on how we, share this information as proposed in the codes, of course, in line with relevant prescripts. With regards to the challenges around property prices and so on, the discussion is ongoing, around gentrification, where people are getting displaced and so on. And we believe municipalities are going to be critical, I think, in this discussion, because they are the ones who will be experiencing real impact. And both ourselves, the municipalities, and short-term rental stakeholders will need to come up with a proportionate response, to this particular area where people get displaced. Miguel touched, on various areas in his discussion relating to, thresholds and so on. So the discussion will have to also look at that, so that we don't have a sector, instead of creating an inclusive, environment, it creates that, aspects of gentrification and displacement of people. So municipalities are going to be key, I think, in this discussion when we are finalizing the regulations. With regards to the specific powers of the municipalities, municipalities do, regulate, even our traditional, tourism accommodation providers, such as hotels, through, their normal bylaws, property rates, and rezoning. So to ensure that, there isn't that misalignment. We need to ensure that when we finalize, I think the Tourism Act, we also don't interfere with the roles that are constitutionally given and to the municipalities, because even at this stage we don't interfere with them when they regulate hotels, and so on. The code also, I think, is specific because somewhere in the clause it says subject to bylaws and local laws. And with regards to how will the department ensure that the STRs create jobs and so on, one of the reasons why we wanted to create an enabling environment for short-term rentals is because we saw that the short-term rentals provide that the opportunity, especially for the first-time entrants into the tourism sector, because all that they need, is to own a property and have a gadget, for you to register, online, and then you are able to participate, in this activity. And we have seen a lot of hosts from rural areas. We have seen a lot of hosts, especially from townships. I remember some best practices around Langa and so on were shown, where, grannies who have properties, they have retired, and they are hosting some of the visitors, from across the globe. So that's why we thought that maybe in the South African context, we need to look at a proportionate response, that which will enable a regulatory environment while ensuring that we create the conditions for fair competition for those who have been also trading in the space. And of course, the majority of them are small players. With regards to whether we have clarified this to the communities, during the tourism white paper, we did a lot of engagements across the country. We also went through the process of public consultation, and I must say a lot of comments came up in this area of tourism short-term rental process. And we indicated at the time that whatever proportionate measure we're going to agree on when we're finalizing the legislation, it will be consulted. So this public consultation process, I think, is part of that continuous engagement process. And of course, the department has various structures where we interact with, which includes participation of provincial departments, participation of local municipalities, and then from time to time we do share these latest developments as they appear. I think those are my just initial reflections, DG and Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, DG. Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, portfolio members, colleagues on the call. I think Senzo did a tremendous job in responding to a lot of the questions. There's just one or two that I really want to add to. The one is around, I think it was the last comments made around how rural communities are assisted, and the importance of bringing them on board and so on. And I think Miguel really also responded to this by saying, and Senzo also spoke to this, by saying that the platform is really open to anyone that wants to register, the platforms for that matter, that wants to register for their establishment for short-term rental. What we do also do, Honourable Chair, in addition to, of course, short-term rentals, is to compile a database for products and services in the tourism sector, of which, of course, short-term rentals are but one of those areas. We are engaging with municipalities through Salga and Kokta as well, to ensure that our database is as updated as possible. And we are currently thinking of different ways of how we can improve the process of updating the database, perhaps in the process of reviewing the bill as well. In terms of the timelines for the bill, and I'm sure Minister might also want to speak to that, but our promise...
Yes. And
Okay.
I would suggest that we leave that for the Minister.
All right. Okay. No, thanks. Thank you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yes. Honorable Chairperson, maybe I should start with Honorable Hlongo's question on the people that are leaving from the department. I do need to indicate that the National Treasury introduced, together with the DPSA, they introduced an opportunity for people that are aged 55 to 59, as well as those that are 61 to 63, if I'm not mistaken, 62, 63, to take early departure. And they made provisions that those people should not be negatively affected in as far as their pension benefits are concerned. So basically you leave early, but you remain with all your benefits intact. So there are people that have opted to take that opportunity without giving anybody's age away. I've got DDG Malan in that category. She will be leaving at the end of March after a very long and successful career with the public service that spans over 3 decades. But also with the department, there's a considerable number of years, almost half of those years that I've spoken about. She was with the department. I've worked with her for a very long time. She was my chief director. She became a colleague as we were both DDGs at some point. And she became my DDG when I was promoted to become a DG. I've relied on her, counted on her. Even now as we speak, during the period that we have seconded Dr. Chetia to SAT for her to act as acting CEO, DDG Malan gladly agreed to act as the DDG responsible for destination development in the interim. The other person who has also left at a senior level is DDG Ngomane. DDG Ngomane, we recruited him about 3 or so years ago. And when we recruited him, he came in as a chief director who was responsible for human resource development. I worked very, very, very closely with him, basically introduced him to many facets of the organization, including making him act as a DDG corporate management, because at the time when he came, we didn't have a DDG for corporate management. For several times, he was actually assisting in that particular domain. And he would always be ready to take up any task that would come his way. So he came to me sometime around January late, and he said to me, "Look, I'm being headhunted." I said, "Being headhunted, what are you saying? Because we just appointed you about 8 months ago in a promotion as a DDG." He says, "I will go and see what it looks like, but it's something that I never saw coming," and so on. I said, "Okay, that's fine." Then he went. He then came back and he said to me, "Look, they've offered me a job." So I said, "What is your plan?" I'm not going to disclose, but he showed me what he is being paid. And when he said, "This is the amount," and he had not even told me where, but he said, "This is the amount that I'm going to be paid," all I can disclose is that the top notch of a DG salary would not have retained him. So I then said, I understand. Big loss. And for both of these two DDGs, people that I've worked very well with, people that I've really counted on. But of course, there are also others that will be leaving because of that opportunity that I've highlighted. So we've got about 7 other people that will be leaving, but this is not at SMS level. We do have people that would have left the department on the basis that they had an opportunity to be promoted elsewhere. And a month or 2 after they've left the department, they write back to me and they say, DG would like to come back. Case in point is our head of strategy, performance, risk, ICT, and so on, Dr. Abtapi, who has taken over the position that previously was occupied by Menomza Mobengu. And he is back to the department now after having been away for a promotion, and he came back as a chief director. We do have, as I'm speaking now, an offer that has just been accepted by another person who wants to come back to the department, who had gone to the Department of Home Affairs through a promotion at director level, but wants to come back to the department. So we have those kinds of developments in the space. But let me leave that one there and just highlight not many, because I think both Senzo as well as Anime, they've really adequately covered most of the questions. We have a complaints officer by legislation within the department. Now, the complaints officer takes all forms of complaints, but can also take initiative and refer matters to different other bodies. So we see this as something that would also assist in cases where we see that grossly things are not necessarily going according to plan. The one thing about voluntary codes is that when that code, because we're saying the code should be put on their websites, when the code is on the website and somebody, or on the app application, and somebody logs in, and whether this person is a visitor or whether it's a host who's uploading their information, the minute they actually get there and demonstrate that they actually read the code, they familiarize themselves fully with the code itself. And there has to be that optionality for opting in, that yes, I've read and I understand the code. Now, once a person has read that code and understands that code, and goes to break that particular code, whether it's by breaking the laws as it relates to false advertising, laws as it relates to Consumer Protection Act, laws as it relates to the bylaws within the particular municipality and so on, having gone through this and all the other instruments that we say should be provided so that there's familiarity with such instruments by the host and so on, that then borders on infringements that can then be directed to other bodies as such, even though this thing is actually voluntary. So there is something there, because it's really saying I intend to behave in this particular way. But once I have actually opted to behave in that particular way, and somebody is booking on the basis that I've actually provided information that says I intend to behave in this particular way, that would be something that can then be tested, whether there isn't something that can be taken up by the other bodies as such. There will also be, even with regards to the POPIA, it does provide that under certain circumstances, information should be provided. So in cases where such information is going to be utilized for good and is going to be utilized to address issues that pertain, for instance, to transgressions and so on, that information should be provided. So in this particular instance, we do believe that there is goodwill. So far, to some degree, there is information that gets shared. There is goodwill that information will be made accessible. Of course, what we're looking at is things also like the customer relations management systems, because that gives feedback in terms of what is the feedback that's coming from participants in terms of hosts, in terms of the visitors and so on. But also what is the feedback from different platforms and so on that is coming from communities and so on. Levels of complaints that might be sent to municipalities and so on, that too becomes a very good tracking mechanism to say, this is what we're actually picking up in this and so on. But that would require continuous engagements with platforms and the hosts, so that continuous improvement is actually taking place, but also that the mechanisms that they've got to be able to flag those who do not conduct themselves in a particular way are activated, and those people get to be known, because it does have a huge negative impact in terms of our own destination at the end of the day. I would also just say that some of the things that may not necessarily be, so we are currently confining ourselves a lot more to what we have mandate for, if I could just put it like that. And this mandate would be what really would be confined to our mandate space and so on. So other areas, perhaps it could be an issue of influence and to be able to get the others to consider mechanisms applicable to their mandate areas as well, in that regard. The other aspects, I think we've taken full note of that in terms of the issues that have been raised and the focus that we should also have. Just to say that the Gazette itself only came out last week. So they still, I think Chairperson said about 55 days or so that is still there, which we will be receiving all of this, of course, interacting in the process to make sure that there is a wider consultation and meaningful consultation in that regard. At the end of the day, we will be guided by what will come out of this consultation widely, including consulting with the formal industry, as like your formal hospitality industry itself, in this regard. The one small thing just to highlight is that there are people who use the platform, and this was also demonstrated in the presentation from the industry. There are people who use the platform to as a normal booking engine for their businesses, and they are not quite the same as people who are using the platform just as hosts. They are just considering that particular platform, whichever one it may be, as a platform of choice for themselves, vis-a-vis someone who's not necessarily registered as a business per se. And those issues, I think, will be issues that will be dealt with when we deal with matters of legislation and so on. But for now, we are dealing with the codes of good practice, voluntary instrument, but a very important instrument, and to a degree enforceable, as I have actually indicated, but not necessarily to say that it's the law, so to say. It's a code. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the Minister.
Thank you, DG. Just the question around when the bill will be introduced to Parliament, Honourable Chairperson and members. We are working currently on an estimated time frame. The drafting of the bill, the process has started already, with also assistance from the state law advisors. And what we are estimating is that we need to bring this bill before cabinet starting the financial year 26-27. And then, of course, after cabinet approval to take it out for public comment, that will also take some time. And then after the public comments, we will then take it back to cabinet for consideration before it's introduced for tabling to Parliament. And our estimates, Honourable Chairperson, is that we want to do this within the financial year of 26-27. But we are pushing really hard, to try and shorten some of the time frames, but public consultation is one process that we must go through, and we must get cabinet approval before it can go to Parliament. But what we will do, we will continuously update the portfolio committee about progress that we are making in finalizing the tourism amendment bill to finally reach Parliament, where the portfolio committee will then take over. There was the question about penalties and sanctions. Those are issues that Parliament will decide on. So just in terms of the time frame, this is our estimates. But once we have concluded the process of the draft bill, we will then also send a progress report to the committee to update you as to where we are. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members.
Let me just thank Mr. Miguel Martins, DG Velem, Mr. Mkala, DDG Malan, and our Honourable Minister for interacting with all the questions that were posed by Honourable Members. I will do some closing remarks, and then Minister and DDG, Mr. Mkala, Mr. Miguel Martins, I think he said he had 2 board members with him as well. Then you may take your leave as we will proceed with, our in-house matters. The norms and standards as presented today are most welcome as they address the importance of regulating the short-term rentals in the tourism sector in South Africa. We acknowledge the challenges caused by the short-term rentals and recommend that the gazetted norms and standards be comprehensive to include e-hailing services. As stated in my opening remarks, in the transport sector of tourism, the department need not to duplicate the work done by the Department of Transport, but it can also consider including this as an annexure so that the sharing economy is addressed comprehensively within the tourism space. The review of the Tourism Act currently underway, as mentioned by Minister, is most welcome, and the committee is eagerly awaiting this bill to be introduced to Parliament to address a number of issues in the sector, including governance matters at South African tourism. The department is urged to engage with SASTRA extensively on the gazetted code of good practice. The norms and standards should encourage short-term rentals to contribute to the TOMSA levy funds. In the finalization of the norms and standards, the department should consume local government, with SASTRA reporting 51% bad behavior to neighborhoods and how this may be addressed through bylaws, zoning rates, business licenses, etc. This is important, particularly when the Tourism Act is amended. This is of paramount importance as tourism is a concurrent function and local government has an important role to play. The Code of Good Practice should look into prescribing the redress mechanism in cases where guests or potential guests have been scammed. As presented by SASTRA, It is apparent that Airbnb is the major player in the short-term rental space. The code of good practice should have some categorization aspects to differentiate big from small players. This is a matter that must be taken further in the Amendment Act to ensure fairness and not hurting small players through over-regulation and compliance burden. The issue of imposing fines for non-compliance should be considered at a national level, with specific amounts determined by the department. This is a matter that should also be incorporated in the Amendment Act. There should be strict regulations for booking platforms and consequences for non-compliance with applicable laws. The size of the hospitality short-term rental sector should be quantified. The contribution to job creation and contribution to the GDP of the country should be quantified. The department should work closely with SASTRA and in quantifying and developing reliable data sources. The department should also engage the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and the South African Local Government Association in developing a standardized code of good practice that may be applied and binding countrywide to avoid contradictions between national and local government regulatory frameworks. The Minister is then urged to introduce the Tourism Amendment Bill in Parliament in the next financial year. This is crucial to address all the issues in the sector, and the Minister have already given us the timelines. The presentation by SASTRA gives clear insights that the short-term rental business in South Africa is growing and thriving. This is good for the economy as it brings on board new players at local level that would otherwise find it difficult to thrive in the traditional tourism economy. The final regulations and the Act therefore should be adversarial but should gear towards compliance with applicable laws and protecting the destination's image. Again, in the committee welcomes the gazetted Code of Good Practice, and we await the final version of the document that will incorporate public comments. SASTRA is urged to seriously engage the public comments process, and so inputs will be invaluable to the final Code of Good Practice. SASTRA to report to the department their members who do not comply with the Code of Good Practice, so that such matters may be taken up through the Tourism Complaints Officer. And with that said, that's my closing remarks. Once again, thank you to our Honourable Minister Dalil, Honourable Minister Sorchu, Honours Deputy Minister Sorchu, Mr. Miguel Martins. I think you mentioned Melanie Creel and Mr. Graflin, your board members. DG Vele, Mr. Mkala, DDG Malan. Thank you for attending our meeting. You may now take your leave from our meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable members, we will now proceed with the last item on our agenda, which is our minutes of our last meeting. Disang, you may proceed to flight the minutes as well as take us through the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The minutes are the minutes of last week, which was the 10th of March, 2026, which was a physical meeting in Parliament, a briefing by South African Tourism on the road development marketing strategy, and the consideration of draft minutes. His apologies and members present in the meeting, attendance and the delegation, introduction by the chairperson, a synopsis of the presentation by us SA Tourism in relation to the objectives of this road development marketing plan, and then the consideration of minutes for the 3rd of March 2026, which were adopted, and then the conclusions and resolutions of the meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Lisang. Honorable members, there you have our minutes. Is there any correction of minutes? I think in the absence of hearing anyone's voice or seeing a hand being raised, may I have a mover for the adoption of the minutes?
Thank you, Chair. There are no corrections, and I move that we adopt the minutes as a pre-reflection of the previous meeting.
Thank you, Honorable Hlongo. Honorable Ishmael?
I was going to move, but since Honorable Shongo already moved, I can second, Chair.
Thank you so much, honorable members. And that brings us now to the close of our meeting. And thank you for attending today's meeting. I think, now, honorable members, you can go and prepare yourself. We all have to take a 12:30 bus to the Parliament precinct. With that said, have a blessed week ahead of you. See you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.